Good morning and salam sejahtera. We are from Group 2 with the members of Khoo, CHANG, and SITI KHADIJAH BINTI ZAINAL. We will be presenting extinct and endangered languages and the genetic classification of languages today. Hi, my name is Khoo. I am going to explain about extinct and endangered languages. A language dies and becomes extinct when no children learn it. Linguists have identified several ways in which a language might cease to exist, at least in its spoken form. A language may die out more or less suddenly when all of the speakers of the language themselves die or are killed. Such was the case with Tasmanian languages, once spoken on the island of Tasmania, and Nicoleño, a Native American language once spoken in California. Similarly, a language may cease to exist abruptly when its speakers all stop speaking the language. This may happen under the threat of political repression or even genocide. Indigenous languages embedded in other cultures suffer death this way. In order to avoid being identified as natives, speakers simply stop speaking their native language. Children are unable to learn a language that is not spoken to them, so when the last speaker dies, the language dies. Most commonly, languages that become extinct do so gradually, often over several generations. This happens to minority languages that are in contact with dominant language, much as American Indian languages are in contact with English. The language is said to be dead when the last generation of speaker dies out. Cornish suffered from this fate in Britain in the 18th century, as there are many Native American languages in both North and South America. Uncommonly, some languages suffer partial death in that they survive only in specific contexts, such as a liturgical language. Latin and at one time, Biblical Hebrew are such languages. Hebrew, on the other hand, has been revived and revised for use as the national language of Israel. The Academy of the Hebrew language succeeded in awakening an ancient written language to serve the daily colloquial needs of the people. By the way, many dialects spoken in the United States are considered endangered by linguists. For example, the sociolinguist Ward Wolfram is studying the dialects spoken on Ocracoke Island off the coast of North Carolina. Linguists have placed many languages on an endangered list. They attempt to preserve these languages by studying and documenting their grammars, the phonetics, phonology, and so on, and by recording for posterity the speech of the last few speakers. Through its grammar, each language provides new evidence on the nature of the human language faculty. In its literature, poetry, ritual speech, and word structure, each language stores the collective intellectual achievements of a culture, offering unique perspectives on the human condition. The documentation and preservation of dying languages is not only important for social and cultural reasons. There is also a scientific reason for studying these languages. Through examining a wide array of different types of languages, linguists can develop a comprehensive theory of language that accounts for both its universal and language-specific properties.
Hi, my name is Siti KHADIJAH binti ZAINAL. I am going to explain about the genetic classification of Malay. For more than a millennium, Malay has been a very important lingua franca in insular Southeast Asia. Standardized forms of it became the national language in Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei, and Indonesia. Indonesian is somewhat different in its vocabulary, idiom, and to some extent also in its pronunciation from the official Malay of Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei. Grammatically, however, these standard varieties are very much the same, differing mainly in the frequency of use of certain grammatical features common to all varieties rather than in exhibiting different grammatical features. Although the official Malay of Malaysia, Singapore and Brunei is essentially the same language, the official Malay of Brunei has a pronunciation which is closer to that of Indonesian. It furthermore uses an elaborate set of terms of address and reference. This set reflects Bruneian society, which is very stratified and essentially feudal. Traditional areas of Malay civilization are the coastal regions of the South China Sea and more particularly Southeast Sumatra, the Malay Peninsula and West Borneo. Where Malay really originated is still under discussion. The structural group for Malay language is agglutinative languages. Most words in Malay are formed by joining morphemes together in terms to glue together. Words in Malay are made up of a linear sequence of distinct morphemes and each component of meaning is represented by its own morpheme. For example, memasukkan. Malay has one of the longest written histories of all Austronesian languages. The oldest written evidence of Malay dates from the end of the 7th century AD and consists of a number of stone inscriptions found in southeast Sumatra and on neighboring Bangka Island. These inscriptions are written in a very archaic form of Malay, full of Sanskrit loanwords. The strong Sanskrit influence which Malay underwent in that period is still witnessed by the hundreds of Sanskrit loanwords in present-day Malay, of which the following are but a few examples. Bumi, earth; merdeka, independence; negeri, country; agama, religion; dewa, god; puasa, fasting; rasa, feeling; arti, meaning; suci, pure, and its more pedestrian counterpart, cuci, to wash; raja, king; putri, princess; and putra, prince; istri, wife; and suami, husband, ketika, when, karena, because, sudah, already. Other evidence for the existence, nature and role of Malay in times past are the many Malay loanwords found in other languages. Malay loanwords are, for instance, found in old Javanese texts, some of which date back to the 8th century AD. They are also found in Tagalog, one of the main languages in the Philippines, which was under heavy Malay influence in pre-colonial times but ceased to be so after the arrival of Europeans in Southeast Asia. They are found in Malagasy, as the early Malagasy must have obtained most of their Malay influence before they left Southeast Asia to go to East Africa in the 7th century AD or thereabout. Malay loanwords in Malagasy are a good indication for the enormous time depth behind the use of Malay as a dominant lingua franca with great cultural impact.
Hi, I'm CHANG. I'm going to explain the genetic classification of English. English is a member of the Germanic family of languages. Germanic is a branch of the Indo-European language family. English is considered as analytical languages in the structural groups as it forms from separate words and grammatical morphemes. And it is a combination of free and bound morphemes or inflectional or derivational morphemes. As an example, high chair. The short history of the origins and development of English started with the arrival of 3 Germanic tribes, the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes, who invaded Britain during the 5th century AD. These tribes crossed the North Sea from what today is Denmark and northern Germany. At the time, the inhabitants of Britain spoke a Celtic language, but most of the Celtic speakers were pushed west and north by the invaders, mainly into what is now Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. The Angles come from England and their language was called English, from which the words English and England are derived. Old English lasted from 5th century to the late 11th century. The invading Germanic tribes spoke similar languages, which in Britain developed into what we now call Old English. Old English did not sound or look like English today. Native English speakers now would have great difficulty understanding it. Half of the most commonly used words in modern English have Old English roots. As an example, be. Middle English lasted from 1100 AD to 1500 AD. In the year 1066, William the Conqueror, the Duke of Normandy, the part of modern France, invaded and conquered England. The new conquerors, the Normans, brought with them a kind of French, which became the language of the royal court and the ruling and business classes. For a period, there was a kind of linguistic class division, where the lower classes spoke English and the upper classes spoke French. At the 14th century, English became dominant in Britain, but with many French words added. Middle English was the language of the great poet Chaucer, but still be difficult for native English speakers to understand today. Early modern English was from 1500 AD to 1800 AD. Towards the end of Middle English, a sudden and distinct change in pronunciation started, with vowels being pronounced shorter and shorter. From the 16th century, British had contact with many peoples from around the world. The renaissance of classical learning resulted in many new words and phrases entered the language. The invention of printing makes English a common language in print. Then, books became cheaper and more people learned to read. Printing had brought standardization to English. Spellings and grammar became fixed, and the dialect of London became standard. In the year 1604, the first English dictionary was published.